do, Justin.
Patience.
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 Detroit Tigers.
Why would you say that?
I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Well, get used to it, everybody.
I want it now.
Patience. Like, they are actually building something. The Tigers. The whole rebuild of the past. The last 10 years. Everything we've been waiting for. Yes, it sucks. It blows. It's been a horrible decade. Since Scott Harris has got here, that's where everything restarted over from the beginning. So I get the frustration for the whole thing, but every move since Scott Harris came 22 months ago, not even 2 years, it's been completely different than what we should have expected from Al Avila and Chris Illich before, and ownership and in the front office. Like, they used to draft decent players. They had no developmental structure at all. There's no players. Maybe a couple pitchers here and there. Maybe you get your one hitter occasionally. Really, you didn't. There is no developmental structure. Scott Harris is coming in trying to rebuild this organization. It was just lip service before, years ago, when they said the rebuild is over, blah, 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 blah. When you draft players, you don't develop them, and then you go out and you spend money on shitty free agents like Javi Baez. This is the mess that Scott Harris walked into. Yeah. Scott Harris hasn't been perfect. Every move he's made hasn't been perfect, but what he's doing, he's been doing a lot of good things, a lot of really good things. We just don't see it. It's at the single A level. It's at the double A level. He's had to literally start from the bottom. You can't start at the major league level. You have to start at the bottom. There are questions that need to be answered 100%. And at this specific trade deadline, there were some underwhelming moments when you consider the hype. But when I look back on the trade deadline, it's not an A, it's not an A+, but it's a win of a deadline. Like, they just shipped out 4 rentals for 8 prospects, 4 of which are now in the Tigers' top 30. I got crushed for saying patience, that they have a bright future. People, what are you talking about, bright future? 20 of their top 30 prospects are in single or double A right now. They're below double A, not triple A, not all the guys that Avila drafted and they tried to develop in the previous regime. Everything Scott Harris has done is turning into top 20 prospects, top 30 prospects, just below the double A level. 4 of which now from this trade deadline are now in the top 30. What? The number 1 prospect moved at this deadline. Thyron Lenzano, the catcher / first baseman from the Dodgers, in the underwhelming Flaherty trade because of what we saw Kikuchi get from the Astros, or the Blue Jays get for Kikuchi. If you really step back and look and understand, Scott Harris and most major league organizations, they don't follow the prospect. Like, they don't base their scouting on Baseball America or the MLB Pipeline Report, which we all do. This is how we kind of bet the thousands of minor leaguers all around the world. That's what we kind of get our bearings from, these lists. Scott Harris doesn't. Dalton Rushing was the Dodgers' top catching prospect. He values Lenzano much better. They see him as a future star to come up with Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal and Jackson Jobe.
So they're setting their window then.
What was that?
Then they're setting a very clear window.
Yes, and that is the frustrating part, and that's what I understand. That window is 2 to 3 years away.
And that's why that P word is such a dirty word. You know what? Word to James Edwards. I know part of the Pistons rebuild. He once famously said that Detroit sports fans don't have the stomach for a rebuild.
Yeah, and I don't blame him. I might agree with him, but I don't blame Tigers fans. Like, you want to watch a good product on the major league field. Like, that is the goal.
Because they've supported.
They have, and they deserve it, but they deserve it now. Yeah, I get all the frustration, but the blind frustration and the hate and the panic platoons and the Scott Harris, Scott Harris deserves to be fired right now and Hinch fired. Like,
oh, so you mean the Jack Campbell overreaction?
Yeah. And so baseball is so hard to like understand the prospects and the development, and when you're in a rebuild, unless you're going to spend, and we'll get to that next, unless you're going to spend, if you want to do it the right way, it takes time because you got to fortify. You got to fortify your minor league system, which this was a huge step towards that.
But when we were telling people, you know what, this team is going to be up and down, it's going to be a roller coaster, but expect them to be hovering around, plus or minus 5 games of 500. We caught a lot of slack. A lot of people saying, no, they're not going to really be like that. But here they are like that, and who knew? This Tigers team knew. They have a clear eye and a discernment for the talent that they have and how it all fits to their grand scheme of how Scott Harris sees the talent and how A.J. Hinch manages the talent. But what do you say to people who believe that the Tigers have done this in the past? They've traded, rentals, they've traded good players, they've brought in prospects, they've heard these prospects are now part of our top 10, top 20, top 30, and then they believe this after 10 years of that. it'll never end. We're on a hamster wheel. What separates Scott Harris from the previous attempts at this?
His elite prospect identification, talent identification at the prospect level, from 17-year-olds to 23-year-olds. He's still got something to prove at the major league level. And once we stop talking about the prospects, we'll get to that. Like, yes, there are question marks, but he's shown us he can identify prospects. And that's what got him promoted from the Cubs, with the Cubs before. Then he got a job as a GM out in San Francisco. And then he has a really strong reputation around the league in terms of his talent identification. And we see it in his draft picks and the guys he's gotten from the Michael Lorenzen trade, the guy he got from the Joe Jimenez trade, Justin Henry Malloy. Like, he can identify prospects. That's I'm not worried about. And he's implementing a developmental system led by Chris Fetter, Robin Lund, Juan Nieves, led by Michael Bedard and the pitching group at the major league level. We're not seeing the results at the major league level yet, but they've reshaped it all from single A up to triple A, and it just takes time for 18-year-olds to get up there. He's drafting high school players. He's drafting developmental products with high ceilings. Some of them are going to hit, some of them are going to be bust, but he's making the right moves. Jesus.
Something I want to hear about is...
That's next, Joe Wall. Joe Wall, that's next.
The Jack Flaherty rumors came out on Monday that he was about to be dealt to the Yankees, and he had some injury concerns. Do you think that affected us getting a Kikuchi-esque package because of his injury concerns, or do you think that this is kind of the going rate for him?
Same wavelengths. My gosh, I was about to ask that.
Maybe. Maybe. We don't know. None of us know what the conversations were being had, but I'm pretty confident those conversations with New York were revolving around Chase Hampton, their AAA pitcher. But the Kikuchi trade, while that did sort of start the hype, start the market, that was an outrageous trade. Like, the Astros gave up a lot for him. When we're talking about their number 9, and take this with a grain of salt, their number 9 ranked prospect, number 13 and a third. Like,
I mean, they are ranked 29th in the MLB pipeline for their prospect system. The Astros.
Oh, right. So they're not. Lenzano is better than, was it Bloss, the pitcher, who's been pitching in the big leagues for the Astros. He came up, I think, from Double-A. He's only in the big leagues because the Astros have had injuries. But he is a big, like, on the surface, it looks like a loss. It looks like the Astros completely, I don't know, crapped the bed and gave up way too much to the Blue Jays when you talk about the prospect rankings. But if you really dig deep into the potential of these prospects, the Tigers got a better deal. And definitely in Scott Harris's eyes, and he talked about that in his press conference after. There were some things he weaseled around, but to them, it was by far a better. They wanted Lenzano over Russian. They wanted Lenzano over some other guys' prospects. So to them, this is a win, especially when you consider the reliever they got for cash. We're talking about 3 prospects for Jack Flaherty, 2 of which are now in your top 30. So if you take the Kikuchi trade aside, if you stop thinking about the value of what that looks like now, this is still a win of a trade. It maybe isn't an A+ in our eyes, but we'll get to the grade. It's in the B range. It's in the B- to B+, in my opinion. It feels different because it came down to the last second, because we heard about the Kikuchi trade. And if I see one more person compare this to Trevor Rogers with the Orioles, the Marlins trade for the Orioles, they got Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers, and I keep seeing, the market for Kikuchi. The Orioles gave up all this for Trevor Rogers. Rogers and Flaherty are in completely different buckets. Rogers is a lefty with 2 more years of control. That's a completely different market when you're talking about giving up top prospects. Yep. And no, just because he's bad or isn't as good as Flaherty or Skubal doesn't mean Flaherty should command more at a deadline. You're getting prospects.
Especially when you talk about, even if you want to lock up Flaherty, you still have to think about the back issues and the injections. Yeah. In terms of his long-term ability to produce for you.
Yeah, scared the Yankees off.
Yep, that was some of the stuff that I was hearing too. So it's like, with those things in perspective and in mind, I believe that largely we're going to hear the vocal minority. Mm-hmm. But our chat family, 19% of them say that they believe it was bad moves. 46%, 47%, they say back to rebuilding. 35% say good moves. I wonder what back to rebuilding means, because I think back to rebuilding and good moves can still be good things.
Yeah,
they can still. So if you selected back to rebuilding, I am interested and curious to know, what do you mean by that? Is it something more positive or is it something more negative? Because if you have a clear sight, a clear path, and your window can lead me to winning, or at least the roster that you believe will win within 2 to 3 years, and it's a new regime, then sometimes you have to give that, to be fair, the time to take root.
Yeah, and I'll almost I'm not push back on JB, but the phrase back to rebuilding, I mean, if we're really looking, I think it's the same rebuild since Scott Harris got here is moved farther along. So I don't think they took a step backwards. I just think they defined that the step forwards is a slower step than what people want. What's up?
I also want to point out that Alavila. Oh, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. Think about it.
I was going to say, so effectively, this feels like Tobias Harris with Detroit Pistons fans almost. And I know it's different things because Tobias Harris is supposed to be a plus player and the Tigers are selling, but in terms of the expectation, people went into, hearing all this cap space, hearing that maybe they kick the tires on some premier players, and they get Tobias Harris, it's still a win for me in the free agency, but it's not that, man, this is what I thought we were going to go out there and get. That's kind of what I'm sensing here with some Tigers fans that are at least being more vocal about it on socials, in chats, and in forums.
It's a win, but not an X factor that you wanted.
Say it one more time.
I said it was a win, but not the X factor that you truly wanted to help this team get better.